Greetings, marketeers. Back for part 2 of chapter 4, managing market information to gain customer insights. We're continue talking about marketing research. We ended part 1 with defining the problem and the research objectives. Now we're going to talk a little more about the research process itself, which is I always find very engaging and interesting. I hope you will too. If you don't, just act like it. So let's talk about data, right? Typically, we have a research plan, and it's going to involve gathering some data, depending on what the problems are with the firm, or what problems the marketing department, or what issues they're having. They're looking for information on some sort of issues. So secondary data, which you've seen an example of when I went over the segmentation tools earlier, the Census Quick Facts and the Claritas segmentation tool. Those are examples of getting secondary information. It's already been collected. It exists somewhere. And it could have been collected, it probably was collected for another purpose, because, we've got some specialized issues that we're working on, but there's data out there that exists, and there's even data in, say our own firm's database that exists. We just have to see if we can get out what's important to us. The other primary category of data is primary data, and that's data that we collect for our specific purposes here, the issues that we're going to study here. So you should know the difference between secondary and primary. Now, what are some advantages of secondary data? Well, obviously it's lower cost, because we can go to the U.S. Census and we could find out what the gender breakdown is for the state of Iowa. We don't have to go to Iowa and pull all the records from all the birth records and calculate that on our own. I mean, because that's expensive. So it's out there. We can get it quickly on the internet. We can get tons of information quickly, or right out of our own system if it's our own company. And we may not be able to collect it otherwise, especially if it's proprietary data that we've collected for our company. Right, that we may not be able to get that if we just attempted to get it. Disadvantages: they weren't collecting the data for us. The census is not collecting data for Target, let's say. So some of it might be useful, some of it not. How old is it? I'm going to put accurate and current together. Is it a year old, 2 years old? Have there been big changes in a certain geographic area that now make the numbers no good? And what's the impartiality of it? If you find secondary data about unleaded gasoline, and the survey was conducted by British Petroleum, let's say it might not be impartial. It might be, and some people collect information. It's called advocacy research. They'll do research, and you may know it or not know it, but they may ask leading questions and things because they're looking to get information of the type that they're looking for. They're not just looking for impartial information. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data. That's data that already exists out there. So let's talk about primary data collection. Research approaches, contact methods, who are we going to sample, and what kind of instruments there are available. And we're going to talk about each of those in turn as we move along. This is a nice chart that's in chapter 4. You can see if we, so let's say we're going to create a survey on Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey. Now, are we going to call people and ask them those questions over the phone and then log them ourselves? Or are we going to post it to Facebook and ask everybody on Facebook, send this to a friend of yours? Are we going to mail it to people and have them fill it out with pencil and paper? Each has pluses and minuses. And then to decide our sampling unit, size, and procedure. So, you know, when you see a survey of, 70% of the people that live in the United States, support this or that. Well, obviously they didn't ask 70%. They didn't ask everybody in the United States how they felt about an item, right? They asked a sample that they have deduced represents the whole. Now, there's a lot involved in that, and we're not going to get too in the weeds in a principles of marketing course about it. But there are different ways to decide, if we're going to intercept people at the mall, every fifth person, and ask them questions. Okay, we could do that. That's called an intercept. And then we'd say, well, how many of those people do we need to get in order for our survey to have enough power, it's called, for it to be, legitimate and really represent the whole population. So we sample every fifth person at the mall, and we give them, a survey, and then how many do we have to have, and what kind of sampling unit are we going to use? Again, we're going to come back to some of this. And then what are we going to use? A questionnaire? Most people are familiar with questionnaires. I think everyone within the sound of my voice knows what a questionnaire is. Thing that asks you to answer questions. Or a mechanical instrument. What? What is that? Dr. Williams is talking crazy like a tree fell on him. We're going to come back to mechanical instruments, or we're going to hit on that a little bit in the future. This is just kind of an overview. A little bit later presentation, not in the future. I mean, like momentarily. But anyway, that's a great chart, and you should be familiar with it. You should know what each of those are, what they mean, how they can be used. So we're staying with primary data collection, and the authors talk about two approaches, observational and ethnographic. So observational research, that's when researchers or marketers, they not only observe what consumers do, but they might observe what consumers are saying. So if we had a lab and we set it up as two shopping aisles and we watched and paid attention to how people went up and down the aisle and what attracted them to different items, that would be observational. And then if we also read what they said to one another about the products, then that would also be observational and can provide some rich data. You can also do that by, if we went to L'Oreal, well, they make a bunch of different things. Say L'Oreal Health and Beauty Aids on Facebook and just used a software package to scrape their Facebook page for all the information and comments from people. And then we could get some insights there, watching what people say and do. Ethnographic research involves, as it says there, trained observers to watch and interact with customers in their natural environments, like watching a wild animal in the jungle versus at the zoo. So instead of a lab, where people might know certainly they would know they're being studied or being watched, and maybe we actually do it in a real location, in a football stadium to see how people approach the concession stands. Which way do they go? Do they go by the ATM first? Do they take the east entry, the west entry? Things like that. So, observational or these research approaches can give a lot of insight to researchers, because oftentimes people are not willing to provide information for whatever reason. They're either hiding from the law, or they feel it's an intrusion of privacy, or they're unable. They just can't. If you ask, you're going to ask them questions that they can't answer, and the backside of that is a person that doesn't know but answers anyway really messes up the research. And when you're watching people observationally, you can see people's unconscious actions. Consumers and people do things they don't even notice. So you know, that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of those two research approaches. And then we come to survey and experimental research. Survey, everyone's familiar with that. It's a very widely used way to collect primary data. And it's very well suited for gathering descriptive information. Right, like, you know, if I survey the class about the food offerings on campus at Dalton State, you would be experts in it, and I could get some good descriptive information about your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions about food service on Dalton State campus. Experimental research, that's much more in depth. All right, and again, like I mentioned a minute ago, sometimes people can't answer, or they're just unwilling to answer. So an experiment is best suited for getting information that we can use to see if we can find some causality. In other words, causality between A and B. So I could divide this class into two similar groups, and then expose one group to one type of stimulus A and another group to another type of stimulus B, and then ask you questions about your feelings about this, that, and the other, whatever I'm interested in. And then we'd have two groups, and that you could have responded the same or responded differently. And then I could say, okay, well, this group received no stimulus, this group received stimulus A, this group received stimulus B, and only the people in A thought this way about that. So we can infer that this type of message, if you expose this group this type of message, it might cause them to feel this way about that. Okay, so that's experimental research, and that's much more in-depth than just a regular survey to ask, you know, how many people have problems parking on campus, right? So this is another nice chart of strengths and weaknesses of contact methods. You can see we got mail, telephone, personal contact, and online. So let's just look at speed. If we mail surveys, research instruments to people, it's poor, right? It takes several days to get it. And even if they fill it out right then, several days to get it back. Telephone, if they answer the phone, that's pretty fast. We make contact with them, again, it's pretty good, but it may be tough to do that. Online, speed of data collection is excellent, because, you know, you click send and everybody has it, and they can fill it out and you get it right back automatically. I'm going to come back to that again in a minute. All right, so primary data collection, a focus group. We talked before about the difference between qualitative and quantitative. And to make it simple, we'll say quantitative data involves numbers. Qualitative data generally doesn't involve numbers. It involves, you know, perceptions and feelings and things that people may have. And a lot of times that information comes from focus groups, where you get a group of people and a moderator start the conversation, asking how the men feel about something or the women feel about something, and all of it's recorded, and then all of those sound snippets, the different statements people make about things, those are all put together, and you try to see if there's some overriding feeling that most of the group felt this way about that or that way about this. And an example of the inset is an evening with Lexus. So I guess all of those people in that picture are other luxury cars that Lexus considers competitors. Maybe a BMW and a Mercedes-Benz and a Lincoln maybe. I don't know. And they just talk about it says why they did or didn't become Lexus owners. So some didn't. Some may have one of each. And they'll get insights out of that. You can get some very rich qualitative data out of those types of things. You can't really generalize from it, though, like we could if we had a quantitative sample, some quantitative data from a statistically solid sample that we collected. In a group of people, people may lie. They may not really share their true feelings. Maybe one-on-one might do it better. Well, then you become really time-consuming and expensive. Maybe their boss is in the room. They're not going to say anything. Very time-consuming and expensive, but you get very rich data from focus groups. And typically, you would do that at the beginning of the process when you could do it later on, but a lot of times it helps you focus on what would be some good research questions to investigate. Online contact methods, low cost, fast, higher response rates, way higher than mail. Mail is very bad, and good for hard to reach groups. As long as they have an email account, we can reach them whether in metro Atlanta or whether they live in rural Red Root, Idaho. It costs us just the same, and we can get information from them. Same questionnaire. Then we've got to have a sampling plan. Now, what sampling plan? Well, I already mentioned it before. A segment of the population that we're going to use to represent the population. So, who is to be studied? Well, if I studied the Dalton Chamber of Commerce about the campus food offerings at Dalton State College, would that be a good sample? No. I need to survey some people who have participated and consumed the food offerings on campus, right? How many people? That's a calculation. There's plenty of online tools. You can look it up if you wanted to. How many people do I need to sample if I want to ask, if I have two variables, let's say. And then how do we choose those people? There's a big survey research platform called Qualtrics, which you're going to be exposed to in a minute. If I had a research project, I could talk to them about what it was and say, I need 112 people are involved in neurosurgery. And I could pay them, and they would send my survey to 112 people who are involved in neurosurgery. That's called a panel, and they have those panels available. If I was wanting to, again, talk about the parking situation at Dalton State College, well, I don't need to do that, right? I could, as long as people parked, find people that drove cars and parked on campus, I could put together a sample out of from the student perspective, from students at Dalton State. But those are all considerations. You can't just get a group of people and call it good. So you need to be familiar with these different types of samples. And this is a great chart. that is in the book. So we're in a political season right now. We've got political offices are on the ballot, from president all the way down to the county and maybe even city level, right? So when they put out, say, a Georgia Senate poll, research company does, and they'll say, well, we sampled, we asked 1,513 people, which gives us a margin of error of 3%, which we're not, margin would be something for the marketing research class. But if everybody in Georgia had a known and equal chance of selection, that's called a simple random sample. So if they did it by telephone and they used a random number generator, and they asked a couple of screening questions, you could call that a random sample. A stratified random sample is you divide the population into mutually exclusive groups, so one person's not in two different groups, and then we'll draw a sample from each group of people. Then we have a cluster sample. Those are all probability samples. Okay, so a political poll would be a ability sample, because they're saying that based on our data collection, you know, candidate A leads candidate B by 3 percentage points within some range of error. Non-probability samples, you can't specify a probability of an event happening, not happening, or the possibility of it happening, the probability of it. And the first one, a convenience sample, if I said, you know, I wonder what the Wright School of Business students think about the registration process, I said, well, you know, I'm just going to ask my classes. I'm going to give them a questionnaire. That's a convenience sample. If we were meeting face to face, I would see all 3 classes twice a week, right, at a minimum. And you are students at the Wright School of Business, and I'm going to call that pretty good. So that'd be a convenience sample. It also involves my judgment. So in my judgment, you are all qualified to answer questions about the registration process at the Wright School of Business. A quota sample would be, you see, it's a researcher finds and interviews a prescribed number of people in each of several categories. So let's say that we wanted to find out, we had a large overarching question. We wanted to find out what freshmen thought about it, what sophomores thought about it, what juniors thought about it, and what seniors thought about it. So we might decide, well, we're going to ask 25 people in each category, right? Because it's something that affects the whole school, and we're interested in the overall feeling about it. And that would be an example of a quota sample. And those are all non-probability samples. Research instruments, questionnaires. Now, as we've stated, everybody's familiar with a questionnaire. Most people have taken them. If you go to Kroger and leave and you fill out you log into their web address that's on your receipt, that's a questionnaire, right? So in a questionnaire, you can ask open-ended questions, or you can ask closed-ended questions. So closed-ended would be, do you like this? Yes, no, don't know. And open-ended, would be, how do you feel about the library? Writing in this block. Now, there's some problems with that. Too many open-ended questions, and people get tired of filling out the survey. Another good rule of thumb for survey completion is the shorter you can make it and get the information that you need, the more chance there's of people taking time filling it out correctly, and you get good data. There's also the issue with double barrel questions, and you see this in a lot of surveys that apparently haven't been reviewed by anybody that's good at survey design, but they say, did you find Oakwood Cafe to be reasonably priced and delicious? Well, how do you answer that question? I may have found it to be reasonably priced, but not delicious. Or I may have found it to be not reasonably priced, but it was delicious. What does delicious mean? I have an idea of what delicious means. It may be different than the idea you have of what delicious means. You see, all those things, putting together the questionnaire is not as easy as most people think when they get into it, which is again, that's for a research course. So they're very common, though. They're very flexible because you can add questions, take away questions, pilot test it until you get it like you want it, and then roll it out to everybody. And very useful in exploratory research. Now, to that end, what I want you to do is, when this is over, which will be not too long from now, go to our class site, if you're in section 1 or section 30, and under the content tab, links, there's a link for a Jacksonville State University football hype video from 2019. I want you to click on that video and watch it. I think it's about a minute. And then right below that, there's a link for a research instrument, which is a questionnaire, which will, again, only take you a couple minutes. I want you to click on that after you watch the video and complete that questionnaire. And then we will talk about it in a few days after we get some results. All right. So I told you we'd come back to mechanical research instruments. Checkout scanners. That is a mechanical research instrument. You say, well, I just thought they did that so to speed up my checkout. Well, it does speed up checkout, and it keeps people from changing prices, and it's more exact. But they also, when you scan your shopper's cart at Food City or Kroger, then they link up all those items to you, and they keep track of that in a database that you are buying diapers. You probably have a baby or somebody who's wearing diapers. So you'll notice that you'll start getting coupons printed on your receipt or via your email for baby items. And they'll mark that date. And as that baby gets older, they might not know exactly how old that baby is. But they'll move along, and you'll start getting ads for all sorts of other stuff involved with children. They also mention people meters and neuromarketing. That slide's kind of screwed up. But those are examples of mechanical devices. Let me give you another one, because I am interested in social media marketing, and I research and write about social media marketing and uncontrolled communications, not controlled by the firm, and what we call electronic word of mouth. So I'm going to give you a second to look at that slide and tell me and then think about it. And what do you think that is? Well, it looks to be the search results from a Google search, right? But what is all of this? that's overlaid. Well, I'll tell you, in the biz, that's called the Golden Triangle. Golden Triangle in Asia is also a place where they grow poppies for heroin, but that is not what this is. That is where people that are looking at a web page result, that is where their eyes go. And how do they know that? Because the people that are doing the searching are wearing glasses that have laser pointers on them that they can't see, but the screen can see it. So it follows where they look. Why is that important? Because it matters. If I'm selling a sponsored ad, right? If I want to buy a sponsored ad, excuse me, I'm gonna get rid of that. I should have changed the font on that, but if I'm Google and I'm saying, well, an ad right here, a sponsored link, is X amount, and an ad in the sidebar, if you can see that, is Y amount. You say, well, you know, as a customer, say, well, I want to pay Y amount, but I want it over here. Well, no, because you have to pay more to be over here, because we know that's where people are looking first. Okay, once you get off this front page and scroll down, it gets very cold. Eyes casting over to the right, not very often. You see each of those X's, and the red color is where it's hottest, where the pointers went most. All right, so that's an example of collecting information through mechanical research instruments, just letting people do whatever they do and recording it mechanically. And that's an example of how web developers and website companies decide how to build their pages, what they should look like, where the important information should be. It's the same way once you get, this is a search result, the same way if you search for Dalton State, the eyes are going to go here. They're going to go in this area here. So we want our best info to be right in here. Okay, and over here you can just put stuff that if people were looking for it, they would go and get it. And you know, you never want your search results to have your good stuff below the fold, you know, down here, because most people don't scroll down to see. All right, so implementing the research plan, collect the info, we have to process the information, then we've got to analyze it. So we've got to make sure there aren't any problems interacting with the respondents. They weren't led in any way. Our questions weren't leading, or if we had an individual leading a focus group, they weren't leading. Were their responses quality responses? Sometimes we'll put timers on them and say, you know, the average amount of time to take this questionnaire is 6 minutes. Anybody that spent less than 4 minutes on it, we'll just delete those, because they were just clicking through, trying to get bonus points or trying to get fuel points or something. There are ways you can build that stuff in to make sure you get good information. You want to see if anybody made any shortcuts, you know, if they didn't ask all the questions they should have asked, if it was a personal interview. And then we want to look at the data and, you know, see what kind of insights or important information we can get out of it, because that's what we're looking to do. In our final report, we're not looking to wow people with, if you're doing a consulting job for a company, they're not interested in all your fancy statistical work. And whether you use partial least squares, you know, regression or structural equations modeling or things like that. They just want to know, you know, what were the findings? Can we make some conclusions? And you should always do that with the people that hired you at the company or with your boss, because they have insight into it that you don't have. So a lot of times you'll present the information and say, this kind of leads us to believe this is true. And I go, well, not really, because of this that you didn't know about. And you go, you're right. It might be that was influencing it. this, that, and the other. And then we'll end with CRM. I'm ending with because, you know, our marketing journey, we'd like to have, as we've talked about before, we'd like to create value for people. And we would like to have a relationship with our customers so that they will stay with us throughout their lifetime. We can maximize the customer lifetime value. Hence, there are a lot of platforms, or many platforms, software packages that salespeople and others enter information into, detailed information, so that we can know more about our customers. Salesforce is one of them. If you've ever known anybody in the sales business, you know, after a call, personal or on the phone or however, or Zoom, then they will enter in information into there, all the way down from, you might enter in what somebody's dog's name was they mentioned, or that it was just their birthday. You might put that in there, what they're interested in buying, what they're having problems with, whatever. And you create all that so that you can manage the touch points between you and them. There's just a list of some of them. You know, we keep track of what they purchase. You really should keep track of what they'd like to purchase that you didn't have. And that's lost sales. Contacts, how many times they call in for service and support. You know, are shipments always late? Do they not know how to use things? Web and social media sites, you might keep track of there, see what they're saying. Satisfaction surveys, are they always dissatisfied with our billing? Because somebody that's always dissatisfied with your billing, eventually they'll find somebody that they're more satisfied with. They pay on time. How do they pay? Would they like to pay another way that we should investigate? So marketing research studies, we talk about that all the time. So these are all touch points that it's all secondary information. There's information that we're collecting that we might can use. And they're also touch points to use when managing, you know, your customer base. And remember, it's much less expensive to keep an existing customer than it is to go find a new one. Or in sports marketing, I call those core customers. We don't really want to lose those season ticket holders if we can help it. So other marketing considerations. Privacy is a big issue. You know, sometimes people don't want to share any information. I do, because I've also collected a lot of information. So I fill out surveys when people ask me to, because I've asked a lot of people to fill out surveys for me. You know, how do you feel about your privacy? You know, online or on the phone or in person. If someone calls to survey you about the Senate race in Georgia, do you consider that they've bothered you while you were at home, or do you even answer it because you screen it? Or are you worried about fraud? Right. That may be what they're saying, but now I'm so paranoid I don't want to answer anything about anything for fear I'll have my identity stolen. Misuse of research findings. They'll share your personal information with others. I can tell you this, data brokers do that all the time. You don't even know it. So, I wouldn't get too worked up about that. And, most big firms do their own research. Small firms think, oh, we can't do any research. We're not equipped for that. I've had classes work on research for the Northwest Georgia Humane Society, where we did some research for them, and we did it as a, kind of a class project. But you can do it if you know what you're doing. You can do it if you know what the tools are and how you can do it. And then international market research, you can imagine how much research Coca-Cola does, or any brand at Nestle that works in many different countries. One size does not fit all. one message does not mean the same thing everywhere. Some people don't respond. A message that gets people to respond in the United States, when we put a call to action on the ad, may have an opposite result, in another country. So anyway, so all of that's important. And this is a picture that a student took of me on a particularly vexing day, I guess, and sent it to me a couple years ago. I don't know what I was doing. Apparently my eyes were hurting or something, or it was the end of the day, but I just always find that funny. And that is really the way I feel about 2020. So it's not the way I feel about chapter 4, because I love chapter 4. All right, so that was chapter 4, part 2. And remember, stay up to date with the class. Log into D2L every day, if not more than once a day, which is better. All right, I will see you online, if not in person.